Solving the right challenges with the right questions is called redefining. Let me tell you a short story about where this one section in the book came about so you have an understanding of the complexity of what we're dealing with. Oh God, it must have been 8, 9 years ago. I had a friend and I started talking about how we look at the world. And what was amazing is that we both used a very similar methodology approach to thinking, and we had never discovered that before. So over the course of 3 years, he and I met several times. We talked about different things. And what I was able to do was identify a methodology and approach, a tool to be able to make sure you're headed in the direction every time you address a new challenge or opportunity. Now, I know that's a grandiose statement. However, those who have learned this, have the tool of redefining, understand its power. So the big component to this, or the big element that I think will drive you, is that you'll find that you personally don't have this methodology, a methodology in the thinking process, and this will give you one. So let me start off with a short story. There was a U.S. retailer who was trying to sell detergent to a local community, a country, and they found that the product wasn't selling well. They weren't moving it. Now you can imagine they had opportunities to ask different questions. And depending on the question they ask, it will take them down a different path. So for example, if they asked, what would it take to sell more detergent to these people, they would have ended up with one solution. But if they said to themselves, and they switched it and said, well, let's find out more about what challenges they're facing, they might discover that there's something completely new there. What had happened was they were trying to sell detergent, washing machine detergent, to the Chinese community. Now, during the time in which they were trying to sell it, very few of the Chinese people had washing machines. Therefore, they weren't buying detergent. They didn't need the big canisters of detergent. They were doing most of it by hand. So if they said to themselves, how do I sell more? What they would have probably come up with was get people to use washing machines. But instead, they refocused their energies and they started to ask better questions about how to be able to move product within that marketplace. And they transferred to a different type of product, one that could be used for hand washing, and solve the challenge. Again, having inventory on a shelf could have been, well, we have so much inventory, how do we move it? Well, that could be discounting, it could be giving it away, it could be sampling. But we changed the model here, we changed the question, or they changed it. And yet, even with this understanding that asking the right questions means something, how to do it still is elusive to many people, very difficult to find. So when you're, by asking better questions, you can improve how you deal with personnel, how operations are addressed, how your vendors are addressed, how products or challenges are addressed. By changing the question, you end up finding or discovering different directions. So with that said, I'd like to ask you, do you have a process or a methodology, a system for strategically thinking? Actually, I would challenge you right now to write down your methodology for thinking. How do you address a challenge when you have one? Now, as much as you could cut, stop, or pause this, I bet very few will. So I'll give you what I have found. I've asked tens of thousands of people to do this, and they don't have one. They don't have a methodology. I don't care who it is. They have a few little outlines they could put together. But the way in which I identify if someone has, and this is me, I identify if someone has a true methodology, I find two things. One, it's taught to other people. And second, they could say, oh, no, let me show you. Bum, 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 bum. Very clear. And they didn't have it. Now, what does that mean? What does that translate to? Let's imagine you had a methodology for creating gold. You had a formula for creating gold. And you had a company with people who work with you, maybe 20, 30. Would you not want those people to know how to make the gold? So you would teach, maybe pieces, break it up, but you teach other people to make gold. When it comes to thinking and you're in a leadership position, one of the things you definitely want are the people around you to think well. And if you could make gold, if you had a methodology which comes out with great ways to think, new answers, you would then deliver that. And I bet you haven't. I bet you look through your history, there's very few times you transferred that skill set. So let's start from the beginning. I'd like you right now to think about the biggest challenge you have right now. And then what I'd like you to do is write that one challenge down, that challenge in one sentence on a sheet of paper. I'd like you to do it so clearly that if someone was to look at it, they'd understand exactly what you were talking about, they'd know your challenge, and they'd be able to start addressing how to solve it. Now, for many of you, you're going to think this is easy. I just write down my challenge. The truth is, writing down a proper challenge statement is incredibly difficult. Because if you could write down the proper challenge statement, you're then on the path to solution. Let me tell you how the way we've defined, or I've defined redefining to be in Paid to Think is redefining is a tool leaders and managers use to always find a better way to discover new competitive mega advantages by identifying true challenges, problems, and opportunities. I mean, we're talking an unbelievable high-tech way of thinking. Now, each day you're constantly addressing these challenges. In your mind, you've got these things whirling around. It might be questions of how do I motivate Jamie or her group of volunteers to work better independently. It might be that you want a VP to approve a project. Or it might be that you're interested in getting a personal growth within your own career. And you're facing these constantly, but asking the question is not enough. It's just the beginning. So you wrote down what your challenge statement is, what you're working on, but it's really about asking the right question. It's the right challenge, or the real challenge. And if you were to think about all the tools available to leaders and managers today, I would say the tool that's most often brought up is that, well, what we need to do is a SWOT analysis. There are no tools to teach you how to strategically think. There are no tools out there, except for redefining, which will show you how to strategically think. So people will bring out the SWOT analysis, and I want you to think about strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats. What is that? It's a data gathering device that has you put into quadrants what your challenges are, or what your opportunities or weaknesses are. But it doesn't tell you how to address them. As a matter of fact, I would tell you I am so sick of SWOT analysis because they're done so poorly that it's amazing that I will watch executives sit and watch a challenge statement go on, a SWOT analysis, for 20 minutes to listen to what really is just data with no answers. Asking the right questions gives you the opportunity of finding the better question. So redefining is a methodology. It's an approach. It's a process that involves steps to address the challenges. And if you consider that if you make one better decision every day, your organization will be so different. Now, I brought this up in Paid to Think. Imagine if you had a team of people asking one better question every day or coming up with one better solution. So it involves a process. There are 3 of them. The first part is to develop your challenge statement. Number 2 is to reframe your challenge statement so that you have a should statement. And your third is to convert your challenge statement into a what would it take statement. And that's where you're going to end up solving it. So before I go into the details, I want to give you 3 pieces that will be useful to you as it's starting to rain on me. Number 1 is that you're addressing a challenge statement and not a goal. It's very typical for people to say, what's my goal? No, it's not a goal. It's a challenge statement. Google's founders originally saw the challenge of too much data and being able to find it to answer questions that they had. They didn't sit down and say, I want my goal is to develop a search engine. It was to develop something to identify the challenge. The second one is that, for example, let's take a community in Africa might say, well, our challenge is people are getting sick, that we need clean water. No, that's a goal. Clean water what happens if you have dirty water and no one got sick? The reason in Africa it's very important is because people are getting sick from dirty water. So dirty water is the challenge, and then the solution is to find opportunities to create. But it's not about, how do I say this? I'll read it, as it might be easier. If you wanted to provide clean water to an African community, your goal is rooted in the challenges that villagers are getting sick from impure water. To some, the goal may be to be sick on pure water. The second, follow the steps precisely. There's no shortcuts here. There's no way of getting around this. There's no assumptions or solutions. There's a lot of tools built in. You wouldn't change a high-performing engine to make it work. And Joe Giesman from a company in Arkansas said it to me perfectly one day. Okay, I'm going to pick up where we cut off, because we just had a little bit of a challenge with where we were directing our camera during our shoot, which is typical of doing shoots all over the world where people have controls in place. So I was talking about Joe Giesman, a friend of mine who ran a very successful business, sold it for a ton of money. One day we were talking about redefining, and we were talking about the methodology and approach behind it. And he says to me, David, I get it. Do you remember when you were in math class, the teacher would say to you, when passing out a test, make sure to answer the right question. And the point was that as much as there seems to be an obvious answer, that obvious answer is not always the answer you should be choosing as your answer. Because hidden within there is a different question. Now I'm going to make a very simple question, and you'll see how easy it is to put it right inside, or to, when you see it, you'll hear it, you'll know it. Imagine if there's a train going 30 miles an hour or kilometers an hour east, and a car going 40 miles an hour west. There are 4 people in the car, 6 people on the train. One of them bakes cakes. Her name is Mary, and the cake is now moving all over. Now, what I'd like you to do is tell me who made the cake. Now, that sounds very easy. It's Mary. But most people start to add the questions of, well, the math, 30, 40, there's got to be an answer in there. And when people ask, when you have complex challenges, sometimes those answers are hidden very much below. So getting back to, make sure that you follow the challenge statement or follow the methodology, is because what this tool does is it helps you to identify what the true challenge is. And if you skip a step, you decide that you're better than the system, you'll find you will not get the results you planned on. And the last one, number 3, is to be sure to use the word challenge. The challenge is much better than the word problem, because problem is negative. Actually, if you hear me talk or when I'm working with people, I always try to change the language, because the language of challenge is such a better word. If you say I have a problem, it becomes negative. How do we adjust this? There's things going wrong. But if you say we have a challenge or an opportunity, it means that there's a solution, a potential outcome that can come out of this. So it's just a better way of expressing yourself. So that said, we're going to start right into redefining. I know I said a lot, but we're going to start into redefining and get you on your way.